I'm Kara Infante, and this is Bookish Flights. In each episode, I chat with one bookish guest as we take some time to sample and savor the pairing recommendations from their bookish flight. We hope to give you suggestions to cultivate your TBR list and nurture your leisure time through books. In today's episode, I am chatting with Nicole Miller. Nicole lives in Southwest Washington State with her husband and two sons, along with her two purebred Arabian horses, chickens, ducks, dogs, cats, and guinea pigs. When she is not writing or tending the animals, she works in human resources. Her book, Until Our Time Comes, was released yesterday. Welcome to the show, Nicole.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
I am so glad to have you on here today and to fill our listeners in about your debut novel here.
Thank you. It's very surreal. I don't know when it'll sink in, but not yet.
Yeah, I imagine even after the launch, you're going to have these like pinch me moments like, this is real. Well, tell us a little bit about who you are.
So I, in short, am a horse and book nerd. So it's no surprising that this book involves both of those things. But I've always loved writing and the written word. I grew up in a small town in Southwest Washington, close to where we're at now. And I had always been outdoors and got a horse when I was 12 years old, and that drove a lot of my interest in activities and everything from high school activities to beyond, and helping with volunteering in different areas, helping with therapeutic riding centers, that sort of thing. I even did the rodeo queen thing for a while, which was very fun, and exposed me to the world of public relations and all the public speaking components that come with it.
What
Um,
a community right there.
and it was just a really great opportunity. Writing in the Rose Parade in Portland and in big, PRCA rodeos throughout the Northwest. And it was absolutely memorable. Alongside that, I was writing novels essentially since I was also 12. There was
Okay.
a connection. All my novels have had horses in them too. Just inspiration. I wanted something to read and I couldn't find it. So I just wrote a story that I wanted to read. So I think that was, it's always been the driver too. So yeah. And then later on, went to college, did a journalism degree, married my high school sweetheart, and then jumped into all sorts of careers, everything from event planning to marketing and community management. That evolved working for a tech startup into a people operations or HR role.
Okay.
Just along the lines, gotten to do some really great things. And now I have two boys who are 6 and 8, very
Nice.
rambunctious and very fun. But yeah, I mean, I think every step of the way, one of my big passions and something I do every year is at least write one novel a year. And
Wow.
almost done that without exception. And sometimes it's been rewriting the same novel multiple times, but just to get those words in, and it's just kind of been that constant hobby.
Yeah. So is it part of, do you have it built into your schedule? Like, this is my writing time in the day.
I really rely on the concept of National Novel Writing Month in
Okay.
November,
Yeah.
where you write 50,000 words in 30 days. So that's always been very helpful for me to kind of get usually 50 to, between November and December, I'll try to get 80,000 words of a rough draft together. And then the other like forcing function that I've had for more than 12, 13 years now is a really stable and great writing group locally that I'll go once a month and meet with these gals, and we'll exchange, chapters and edit each other's work. And so I'll take that, usually that rough draft, and I'll make changes on that. So it's not necessarily a set time, but that keeps me kind of going and editing throughout the whole year before the next National Novel Writing Month, where I crank out another novel.
Yeah, and I love that there are these groups that exist because the interview that's coming out, it's not going to be like in timeline with this, but tomorrow is she talked about how vital her writing community was to her publishing her first book as well. And just things don't happen in isolation, right? And I think that I am not a writer personally, but just having talked to authors, how they, the constant of how that community is so important and vital to your story writing.
Yeah, it really is. It helps with both understanding the norms of the publishing industry to lamenting about characters who won't do what you want them to do in your writing, or like a plot hole that you can't figure out how to fill, and so you brainstorm it with a couple other people and then you end up with like 12 really brilliant ideas, and it's just invaluable. So whenever I do talk to someone who wants to go about writing, I always advise they find a local group, and try to find just even a couple people to keep them accountable and just bounce ideas around. It just does wonders.
Yeah. For the writing group, do you guys all write similar genres or are you guys all different?
Oh, we're all different. And one of the best things about my group too is that not all of them are super into horses. And so it was a really helpful thing for me as far as being able to not be too focused on like the horse jargon and things like that. Or when people got confused about why I was talking about a certain thing, it really brought me back to ground level. So that was really helpful. But everything from fantasy to historical fiction to contemporary fiction, and one person does nonfiction as well. So there's just a whole gambit, but the broader perspectives are really, really helpful. One person's really good at like those tiny details and like specific grammar nuances, and some other people are really good at like big, broad, high level, concept wise, feedback, that sort of thing. So it's really cool.
Yeah, and you all have your own strengths that you bring to this group, which is really beautiful.
Definitely.
So you have Until Our Time Comes. It came out yesterday. Listeners, I got an early copy of this and it is the best book I have read this year so far. So it is amazing. If you have not read it yet or haven't gotten your copy, go run out and grab it. But Nicole, can you tell us briefly, let's entice the listeners to go pick it up.
Yes. So this is a story loosely based on true events that happened during World War II, about a particular group of horses in Eastern Poland. And the story itself is centered around a American horse trainer who is trying to learn all that she can from this infamous farm in Eastern Poland. And the invasion of Nazi Germany into Poland derails all of her plans, and, enter the British spy that comes to her aid, and all of the other quirky characters that come along with it. And somehow they have to overcome and try to preserve this very historic Arabian bloodline in Eastern Poland. And what does that mean in the face of war to save, a handful of horses? So yeah, that's kind of the core concept.
Yeah, and for someone that my sister-in-law is an equine vet, but I am not a horse person. So to read this novel for me and to understand, having had conversations with my sister-in-law about horses and their value and what people invest into them, it's something I've literally never even considered about. If war came and ravaged your country, what do you do with a farm filled with horses?
Yeah, I mean, those animals are in our care.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily, especially some of these very finely bred animals. And I look at my own horses, and sometimes they're a little funny. I don't think they would be able to survive in the wild. They need the owner to kind of help them and ensure.
Yeah. Yeah, they're not wild, right? By any means. They're very domestic.
I think they'd be a little lost without some human intervention. So, those are, these are creatures that are, dependent on us and in so many ways. And so, what is the burden of us as a, population to help the helpless? There's also an argument to be made, and there are books about like the book The Monuments Men was sort of a concept of like, rescuing art. Like, what's the
Yeah.
value of art and culture? And these Arabian horse bloodlines go back hundreds of thousands of years, and are infamous, very valuable. There's very, careful attention paid to it. There's stories behind these bloodlines, and a lot of people spend a lot of time on it. And so it's part of, especially Poland's culture. They're very proud of the Arabian breeding program. And so it is an interesting thing to wrestle with.
Yeah. And I have historical fiction is my go-to genre. Like if I'm going to pick up something, that's going to be where I'm going to go. And there's obviously a plethora of novels about World War II, but it's never been told from the perspective of the horse, right? Or even animals really in general. I feel like it's been more, and obviously you still have the people and the characters interacting within the story as well, but of that being the, you know, one of the main themes or motifs of the novel is around the animals. And I am an animal lover. I just particularly didn't know a bunch about horses. So,
Yeah, it's interesting. And I mean, it's interesting to think because there's a lot of casualties of war, big and small, but to think about just the loss of life from every perspective is really it's tough. It's tough to wrestle with. And like yeah, just all of those components really come together. And I wanted both the characters to wrestle with that and the reader too, just to, kind of think about that perspective a little bit. So yeah.
yeah, it definitely made me do just that. Like I said, it was something I literally had never even considered, learning history and then reading about history over many years myself.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so it was a fantastic book. Like I said, best book I've read. It's now March 19th. We're recording, listeners, but it is the best book I've read so far this year. So, congratulations to your release. How long, can you give us perspective in how long were you working on that book?
Yeah, so this book goes back to I'm gonna date myself here. I was about 14 or 15 when the idea actually came into my brain. There was again, going back to me being a horse and book nerd, I was reading a biography on a very famous Arabian stallion from Poland. And there was this really interesting detail about how when the Nazis invaded, his caregivers tried to disguise him because at the time he was so infamous in Europe that he would have been recognized as a very famous and well-bred horse by the Nazis. And so they tried to disguise him. They cut his mane, they threw mud on him and tried to make him look ugly like a farm horse so that they
Mhm.
wouldn't notice him and wouldn't take him. And that little like detail just stuck in my head. And I framed a whole like novel series around that. And over the last, 20 something plus years, I've reshaped and reworked that novel. I've pitched it to, probably a couple dozen publishers at this point. Some of the same publishers, probably the same publisher that actually accepted it later on in a different iteration, different time. So yeah, it's just been one of those things where it's always stuck with me. And one of the horses I have now, who is about 24 years old, and I've known him since he was born. He was at the barn that I was working at, and his mother abandoned him, so we all bottle fed him, and he was just the sweetest thing. And
Yeah.
he's still the sweetest thing, like loves to be just follow you around. So I've had him for a long, long time, but he's a descendant of the horses from Eastern Poland that
Which is
survived World War
so
II.
cool.
It was just like, yeah, again, very like full circle meant to be. Thankfully, those horses were valued in that way.
Yeah. Did you get to travel to Poland at all, or have you been there?
I did not. I was
Okay.
really close. It was on the travel itinerary in 2020 when the
Oh,
pandemic hit and shut down all of those travel plans. So it's still very much on my bucket list. I have spent more hours on Google Maps, like looking through that area than I
yeah.
care to admit. It's beautiful. There are very big prestigious shows there every year. At the Arabian Horse Farm and all of that too. So I very much hope to be there one
Sounds
day.
like a bucket list for you for sure. We were stationed overseas, so we did get to go to Krakow. And it was a country like we just got it literally plane tickets round trip were 40 euro. And we're like, "Oh, let's just go to Krakow." And I didn't know really anything about Poland. It was not on my radar. And it was so stunningly beautiful. Like it just took me by surprise. And I was like, "Wow, we really slept on Poland where we didn't plan for this a little bit better." But it was beautiful. I wish we had had time to go back. So
Yes.
maybe one of these days, you never know.
Hey, one day, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was my finding too, was it was a really very affordable way to like bounce around Europe, and like
Yeah.
Poland was just so affordable, both accommodations and travel. So
Yeah,
one
it's
day.
like just buy the bullet and buy the big ticket to get you from the States there. And then once you are there, it is so cheap to travel around and there's trains and there's planes and there's all sorts of ways to get around. And it's fantastic. So I hope you make it there one day. So, a few other questions about your writing. What have you learned about yourself through writing?
Oh, so much. I think one of my favorite things about writing, and this maybe bounces back to talking about the writing community, but I love how much I've learned about accepting feedback and accepting rejection through my writing. Both everything from, entering writing contests and not winning to entering a writing contest and winning, and like, all of those different like milestones along the way. And understanding the subjective nature of it, and yet still trying to hold true to the story that I want to tell. So it's been a really great journey in that way. I think I've learned a lot about um my own, opinions, and what I feel most passionate about, like what sort of feedback I want to accept and what feedback I don't um, you know, take as much to heart as other
Yeah.
feedback. So I think that's been a really good one for me in my journey. I think that's helped me be a lot more receptive in other areas of life, to change and feedback and growth. So that's
Yeah, I
been
think
really
receiving feedback is definitely a learned skill because I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, I don't know that I've received much feedback in my life. And it's probably like the first few are probably really rough, but
yeah, yeah. And it's really hard. I think especially I think I took some of the I think like when I know a person, I can accept feedback a lot more. And in having, like 12 years experience with my writers group, like there's a lot more trust there. And, like you
yeah,
you kind of naturally take that feedback a little better. When like entering a contest and getting like scores back from a judge that you don't know the name of that judge and or like their qualifications or background or anything like that. Sometimes there were things where I was like, oh, that's just like way off base and they don't know what they're talking. Like
yeah,
talking myself down from that, going like, no, 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 like what can you learn from this? What can you take from this? What like what is this like actually like what is valid about this? What can you apply or what should you
yeah.
apply? Or, what are the data points here? So it was really good, I think, and that's been kind of my whole writing journey, especially with like working on these novels and pitching them for so long and getting very lovely rejections. I know I really do, it's kind of a cliche, but I really do prize a lot of the rejections from publishers that I got long ago. And knowing that like I was waiting for that right time and for the novel to be in the right, configuration, because now I think it really is like where it needed to be. And it wasn't there for a while. So it took its time and it needed to go through all those rounds of feedback.
Yeah. And that's obviously what the publishers do, right? Is like this book is ready to potentially go to market, right? And that, like you said, the iterations that it went through, and now it's here. So that is wonderful. What is something that you wish you like, something you know now that you wish you knew back then?
Oh goodness. Probably goes back a little bit to the timing and like and again accepting some of the feedback. I did do a lot. It took me a while, I think, to get to the point where I was not just kind of fixated on this one manuscript and like polishing it until like it just kind of I kind of got sick of it.
Yeah.
I think I wish I would have known to be a little bit more intentional about making sure that I was like writing other things and exploring other things and kind of, just kind of spreading out my time and energy beyond that one manuscript and like letting kind of things, skills develop and markets percolate and all those things. So I think I would have probably done a little bit more of that, of just making sure that I wasn't too fixated on this one thing and also just, adding more to the like drawer of
Yeah.
scripts. So yeah, I would have done more of that.
Okay. Really, really good advice. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about who you are as a reader. So it sounds like you've always been a reader, but what type of genres do you enjoy?
Yeah, I mean, historical fiction, I'm right there with you. I generally love a lot of like narrative nonfiction. So, telling historical stories in a really engaging way. And then I also am a huge fan of, a lot of contemporary as well. And contemporary romance is kind of my guilty pleasure. When I want a quick read,
Yeah.
especially on like a plane or something, that's my go-to. So yeah, and I love a lot of the like business books and all of that as well. I listen to a bunch of those for work, obviously.
That's
And
what I
so
say. I imagine for your job that comes into play as well. Got to keep the professional development side happy too.
Yeah, yeah, that's probably what I'm listening to like more so than anything else lately, especially like on audio.
Okay.
But then yeah, certainly like historical fiction, historical romance, are my other go-tos. So it's what my bookshelf is overflowing with right now.
Yeah. So in your busyness of life, it sounds like you do some audiobooks to get through them as well and get some reading accomplished. But how do you find time to read?
Yeah, I mean, I think the bulk of it now is audiobooks. We've got horses and the chickens and dogs and cats and children. So
Lots
there's
of
a lot of
tending.
background. Yeah, like listening to a book while I'm folding laundry, or cleaning the stalls or working outside, pulling weeds, whatever it is. So that tends to be the most successful way for me to like absorb books. I do read a lot on my Kindle app on my iPad. I
Okay.
like that one because I like to be able to highlight things on that one in particular. That's more, I guess, for nonfiction, but I love that a lot. I'm also one of those I was gonna say weirdos, but I say that lovingly, who also like if I like a book, I'll make sure I have a physical copy as well. So
Yeah.
just read the physical copy, but if I've listened to it or if it's on my Kindle and I want to make sure I have a copy to like lend to someone or just like have on my bookshelf as part of my like favorite collection, I'll make sure I have a copy of the physical one as well. So I like to support the authors that way too. I feel like I'm like extra supporting them if I bought two versions of their book.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. I'm waiting for the day when we are not moving all the time because I tend to give away a lot of my books just because I know we're going to be moving again. But one day I'm going to have
yeah.
a library room or something of that sort where I can just keep books on my shelf. So I've kept some books that I think my kids will read, like the classics and things that I think will pop up for them. But usually I'm trying to gift them away just because I know we're going to move again. So.
Yeah, definitely. Are you then Kindle or audiobook person?
I 100% audiobook. My kids are 8, 5, and 3, so I'm in the same boat as you. I swear my house is 10 times cleaner because of audiobooks, because I actually want to clean and like wash more dishes or fold more laundry because I want to know what's happening in the story I'm reading. So I
One of my
credit audiobooks to my house being
Yes.
clean.
One of my favorite hacks is if there's a book I'm really, really into, and this takes a lot of self-discipline, I'll only let myself listen to it while I'm on like the walking tread or like treadmill or something so that like I won't like get off. Like I'll just keep working out or whatever it
Yeah.
is. And that's been one of my favorite hacks like of life. But yeah,
Yeah, if
audiobook.
I'm really into a book too, I'll like take it out. We have a garage gym as well. So I'll like take it to the garage and I will work out. Sometimes I'll just turn on music, but if I really have to know what's going to happen, I'm like, okay, I'm going to just lift weights so I can like not be moving around too much and I can really absorb the story. So same, I get that. I feel like we're in a similar season of life. So
Yes, very much so.
totally get that. Well, you have been so gracious to bring 3 books along with you today for a book flight. Can you tell us a little bit about how they pair together?
Yes. So these are three books that I read again and again, and also three very influential books when it comes to Until Our Time Comes, this latest release. So the first one is, and all of them, of course, have to do with horses. The first one is called In Miles to Go by Linnell Smith. It's actually out of print. It's really
Okay.
hard to find. There is a version on Google Books, I think.
Okay.
And you can read it. I've been able to reference it online. And so I think there's a way to do that. It's not on Kindle or anything. It took me a long time to actually find a copy that was less than like $400.
Yeah, because of
No.
the out of print. I have this like pipe dream of like one day I'll figure out how we can get out of print books printed again, because there's been a few that I'm like, oh, I want that one.
Absolutely. So this one's really special, and it's a biographical story of the Arabian stallion that influenced this story of
Okay.
mine. Also, very fun, very cool. Very written in the 60s, but like very, very cool.
So is this the one you read as a kid that really sparked
Yeah, I
this?
read this one
Okay.
go, and like I said, like I ended up borrowing a copy from a friend of mine for a while until I found my own copy too, and I just have read it again and again. It's just a really fun retelling. So
Awesome. Okay. All right. So that was In Miles to Go by Linnell Smith. What's the next book of the pairing?
yeah, the next one might be a little cliche, but I love this one. It's War Horse by Michael. Morpurgo. And Spielberg did a movie version of this, which was great, but in, classic fashion, the book is certainly much better.
Yeah.
And this is, World War One from the horse's point of view. Like you mentioned, there's not a lot of books like this, and it was really poignant, really heartbreaking in a lot of ways. And I think it really brings to light that sort of like animal cost to war and all of that. But also the other
That did
thing.
it come out a few years ago, right? I think it's more of a recent release as a movie. Okay, because I remember seeing the title. When you said it, I was like, "Oh, okay, is
Yeah.
that the movie popped into my head, but I didn't know if they were related." So good to know.
Yeah, great story. And the other thing I like about it is it talks it to the character of the horse, the like duty and like, serving is really important. And I see that in the animals that I've worked with. They love having jobs and a purpose, same as us. And so I think that really brings it to light. And I just love that story.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that part about animals in general, right? Is they all have their own personality if you just kind of pay attention and you see, and they're so much more than just a pet to me sometimes.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I saw this with a lot of the horses at like a therapeutic riding center. They're very like specially trained to work with kids of different disabilities, and those horses are just so patient, and they just really seem to understand their role and their job in a very unique way. And they just have like this fulfillment and this kind of happiness that like you don't always see in like horses that are maybe less, utilized. And certainly my horses are pasture pets right now. They don't
Yeah.
get rid as much as they should. So it's just so different when animals have a job and they just seem to know it. It's really cool.
Yeah, exactly to your point of that they have a purpose too, and when they feel they're in it, they can you can tell they're content.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so that was Warhorse by Michael Morpurgo. And then what's the last book of the pairing today?
The last one is The Perfect Horse by Elizabeth Letts. And this one is nonfiction, but it reads very much like a fiction story. It came out a couple years ago, and it was one that I was probably like 10 years or 15 years after writing like my first version of this manuscript and rewriting it many times, where when I saw this book, it was directly tied to the story that the novel's based on. And so it was like light shining down from heaven of like, oh my gosh, like this is someone else knows about this story. This is amazing. And
Yeah.
the book became a bestseller. And so it was, one of those things where obviously there was an interest in this story and the way that these horses were, saved during World War II and all of the pieces to it. There's so much more to it as far as like the U.S. Army involvement and different support from even German soldiers who wanted to protect these horses near the end of the war and all these different components to it. It's just really riveting, really good book. And it's one of those ones I read a lot as I was writing the book for like extra details and
Sure.
verifying some of the key facts, but I just really enjoy listening to that story again and again.
Okay. All right. I'm very intrigued after having read yours. I'm like, I'm gonna have to go check this out. So that was The Perfect Horse by Elizabeth Letts. I had one more question for you about your novel. So obviously you said you've rewritten this one many times. How close is it to what your first manuscript was on this?
Oh, like night and day different.
Okay.
Um, and it's funny, I was actually telling, so one of the versions that my group of high school friends, who read it with me and encouraged me to write it, like it used to be called Wishes and Dreams, like like the
Okay.
corniest of like high school writing,
Yeah.
high school writing. But it was very different. It was very much like originally I had it as like a trilogy and like spanning the whole war and all these different things. So very, very different. The core concept is there, that key horse, that stallion that we have to really ensure that he survives and endures is certainly there. But I'll say that the characters are far more developed and some of the supporting characters are way more pivotal and more memorable. And so it's been fun to see it all take shape.
Yeah. You just had me thinking about that as you were mentioning. And I was like, gosh, I wonder how, what is the perspective of like what it started at to what it is going to be here
I had
now.
different iterations too, because there was a time too where When I was pitching it to different publishers, they were like, "Oh, well, World War II books aren't selling if they take place in Europe." And so I tried to like transpose it to the US somehow to like make it be like based in the US, and that's a good lesson too of like, you can follow markets sometimes, but like you can't force the story necessarily. It just didn't work at all. So like I again revamped it a bit, and now the market changed a little bit, and European set World War II is selling very well, and so the publisher was really excited about it. So you never know.
Yeah, you definitely never know. Because in my mind, I'm like, gosh, I would think that I can't imagine that European World War II history is going out off trend, but
Now it's good. Now it's good.
really good to know. Well, how I love to end our show is with our bonus pairings here. So these are just a speed round of questions that you can answer really quick. And you've already answered this one, I think, but are you a rereader?
Yes, very much so.
All right. What is one book you've read that has changed your life?
Oh, probably Francine Rivers, The Mark of the Lion series.
Yep.
Classic.
Yep. I read it last year for the first time, actually, but I
Well,
loved it.
those are ones you wish you could go back and reread for the first time again.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can't get that back. So, and then where is your favorite place to read?
Oh, good one. I mean, I'm probably just kind of, my answer is probably influenced by the fact of my stage of life, same as you. Anywhere that I can just get like maybe some quietish audio time. No kids piping up like while I'm trying to listen, that sort of thing. So probably like deep in the middle of chores, like outdoor chores where like the kids are in the backyard playing and I'm like just pulling weeds or in the barn cleaning, that sort of thing. I really like that because I can get in like this really awesome Zen state and just listen to the book and
Yeah.
keep up some movement and all of that. So
Yeah, the
yeah,
kids are taken care of. You can have a moment to yourself. That's really important. So your days are busy taking care of others and your job and everything else. So that's important. And then lastly, what are you reading next?
oh, good one. I think the next one on my list is the Foxhole Victory Tour by
Yep.
Amy Green.
Yeah.
Lynn Green. Sorry, I have her
Yep.
name.
Okay.
And yeah, so I'm really excited by that one. The cover is beautiful. I love that concept. So I'm just super stoked to read that one.
Yeah. Well, you'll have to keep me posted. That one's on my list too. Just
Okay.
haven't got there yet. So my never-ending TBR. It's very long. So, well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I know your time is precious and I appreciate all you've given me.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for listening to this episode today with Nicole Miller and her book flight of books about horses and history. We'd love to hear what other books you'd pair with this book flight at www.bookishflights.com. You can now leave us a voicemail here at Bookish Flights on Speakpipe. We'd love to hear from you about what books you've loved from the show, what guests you've loved hearing from, or anybody that you'd like to hear from in the future. You can head on over to www.speakpipe.com/bookishflights. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. As Emma Thompson said, I think books are like people in the sense that they'll turn up in your life when you most need them. Cheers to you, dear readers. Until next time.